Okay, good morning. Yeah, I know. Monkey is still he's 3.5 hours into his stream. He must be doing a 4 hour stream today. That's all I can say. He is really going overboard here. Uh, Especially since he's used a video I'd planned on using, but him and Jack have made all the points for the most part that I was going to make. So we'll just go ahead and you want to see what he's got to say about Kamala Harris's speech? Just I pretty much can't disagree with too much of what he said. And I don't, really wouldn't have anything new to add to it. So catch his stream, and you'll be able to. Yeah, just pretend that's my horrible voice there over there going yippa yippa yippa. Oh Lord, have mercy. Well, it's Thursday, and yes, I did make it in today. Um, all things created equal. I don't know how long of a stream I'm going to have today. Um, there's I've got things that are sort of pressing that I need to make certain I can take care of. But anyway, I do have a few things I want to talk about. Um, y'all know that I am. Let's see here. What do I have in order here? What's this first one? Oh, here's an opening video I want to show. It's real quick. I just happened to see it this morning on X, and yeah, that this is something that does not happen too often. So let's back that all the way up to there and start the video.
Islam is the religion of rape, incest, and pedophilia, where they bow down to a stupid rock and a false prophet. I will never let you be alive.
Now, in case you missed it, she walked up there and she started taking off a scarf over her head. So she did a little uh, disguising of herself so she could get close to this open air meeting of a bunch of Muslims that have some sort of press conference or something going on here in Texas. Okay, honestly, I am surprised she was not physically attacked. I am surprised people didn't try to find stuff to throw at her, attempt to stone her or something, to be honest.
Go back in your cage. Go back to your Muslim. Go back somewhere else.
Yeah, this guy's yelling at her to go back to her cage, dog. So yeah, that's the kind of thing you want to hear. You know, go back to your cage, dog.
Try something, bro. Para acá a la izquierda, a la izquierda. A la izquierda.
Texas State Trooper. There we go. Yeah, so there's that. It's not often you see you see Muslims take over. This is the first time I can remember seeing somebody coming in and not being particularly kind at a Muslim presser or anything dealing with Islam. So, anyway, So that was something unique I thought was interesting, and I wanted to share it out with everybody. Next thing here, illegal immigration. This, what I'm about ready to show here, I did not realize until I read this article that this was actually a thing now. And it is. It is I think it's a wonderful thing that it's actually coming out and showing another deterrent or another way to deal with illegal immigration. Because we've got all these judges, liberal judges. I mean, remember Chucky Schumer sitting there saying, we've got 260 some odd, 265, I think he said, or 263 judges that they are doing everything they can to thwart Trump and his policies. And that's including deporting of illegals. And one thing I want to make very clear here, it's been making the rounds about Trump deporting a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Trump did not deport them. They were not deported. Those children were not deported. Their mother was deported. And she was given the option of leaving the children here in somebody else's care or taking them with her. And she chose to take the children with her. Under the current reading of the 14th Amendment, those children are U.S. citizens, even though the parents are illegals. So the children are welcome back anytime. And their mother, if she abides by the law, could eventually legally immigrate into the United States and bring her U.S. citizen children with her. Or if she wanted to give custody of the children over to a U.S. citizen or somebody who is in the United States legally, that's fine. Now, there are reports that one of the children has got cancer or some other major illness, and how Trump is, this administration is so mean and vicious. Once again, the children were not deported. The mother was given the option of signing custody over or taking the children with her. And she decided to keep custody. So I just want to get that part cleared up here before we go on to this new law. Well, it's not a new law, but you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. Now, see this article, this is a AP, but AP News. So, they're being politically correct. It's not migrants, it's illegal migrants. They keep forgetting the word to use that word illegal. So I'll be more than kind enough to correct them to ensure that everybody knows we're talking about what we're talking about here. Illegal migrants face a novel criminal charge in new border zone in New Mexico. Illegal immigrants recently detained in southernmost New Mexico now face a novel. It's not a novel. That charges that has been around forever. A novel criminal charge of breaching a national defense area after the U.S. Army assumed oversight of a 170-mile strip along the southern U.S. border in cooperation with immigration authorities. So for 170 miles along the southern border in New Mexico, it is now part of a military installation, Army installation. And we all know it is a felony to illegally enter a military installation. You'll see these First Amendment auditors, at least I don't know how many of them are still doing it. I know there was a thing going on among them there for a while where they'd go out and stand outside the main gate or an auxiliary gate of a military installation and record cars coming in and out, and record the SPs or Sky Cops or MPs or Shore Patrol or whatever, the gate guards who check IDs and everything else. And what they would do is they'd try to remain standing in a public area where the general public's allowed to do this recording. But they found that some of them had found out, the hard way after being arrested and charged, that they'd accidentally gone beyond the line that separates the public area from the military installation, which may or may not be at a fence line or something like that. Oh, it looks like Monkey ended his stream. So he decided not to do a full 4 hours. Okay. So maybe I'll get somebody coming over here to my stream. Yeah, I see. I'd started listening to his stream, and from Monkey, I want to make certain that he's getting credit for his streams. So I've got the one computer, my work laptop set up, and I call it my work laptop because that's what I primarily use it for. I bought it out of my pocket. The work had nothing to do with it. So I have that it's a cheap little $300 laptop. I've got it set up over there, and I have it both on the kitchen table, and I got it set up for both the YouTube and the Rumble streams. That way he's getting credit on both platforms for his stream. Because I honestly want to see Monkey making money. I feel bad for him that he's not. I feel bad that he's not getting his Social Security disability as he should be, being as he is disabled and unable to work. He paid into it, and that's what it's there for. But anyway, back to this. Federal prosecutors on Monday applied the additional charge for incursions into the recently designated New Mexico National Defense Area against illegal migrants detained by Customs and Border Protection as the military scales up troop deployments to a sliver of U.S. borderlands now being treated as an extension of U.S. Army garrison Fort Huachuca, I hope in Arizona. See, you notice they're using the words like sliver here. You know what I mean? You got a sliver of pie. You don't have a full piece of pie or slice of pie. You got a sliver of that pie. Something really slim and inconsequential. Not something that you would actually enjoy having. You're doing it because you really want that slice of pie, but you want to make everybody realize that you're on that diet. So you ask for a sliver of it. Meanwhile, as soon as you get out of sight of everybody, you go over there and grab the rest of that pie slice that the sliver was taken from. So anyway, the Trump administration says those soldiers have the authority to temporarily detain trespassers amid efforts to get around federal law. Well, the problem is no. The military has always had the authority to detain anybody trespassing on military installation or any property being used by the military. And this is an accusation that it's amid efforts to get around federal law that prohibits U.S. troops from being used in domestic law enforcement on American soil. I have to really wonder, is it truly a domestic law enforcement? In protecting the border? Is it really domestic law enforcement? I don't know. I really don't think so. I would not. To me, that is protecting the country. That is. It's not a domestic law enforcement. When you have an invasion coming across the border or have had an invasion of people illegally crossing a border, thousands of people crossing a border a day, tens of thousands crossing the border every week. Is that really still at a low enough level to be considered domestic law enforcement? I really think there's an argument to be made there that is no longer domestic law enforcement. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth highlighted the changes that should be charges Friday while visiting troops at the New Mexico border. Any illegal attempt, at least Pete's using the correct word there, any illegal attempting to enter that zone is entering a military base, a federally protected area. You will be interdicted by U.S. troops and Border Patrol. New Mexico base ACLU attorney Rebecca Sheff warned that the military buffer zone represents a dangerous erosion of the constitutional principle that the military should not be policing civilians. Once again, these are people illegally attempting to enter our country. You've heard me say before. In fact, I said it last week. I've said it the week before. I've said it the month before. I've said it the year before. I want to see that, to use the AP's terminology, I want to see that sliver of land at the border being patrolled by the military 24/7. Hey, Data. Hey, Digi. Good morning, Ramen. Yeah, Digi. Depending on if it's a pumpkin pie, I just take the whole damn pie. My wife and kids get mad at me whenever I bake a pumpkin pie because I always bake two, one for them to share and one for me. And no, I'm not baking a little 6-inch pie for me. I'm baking a whole 10-inch pie. And that whole damn pie is mine and it will be gone that day. She expressed concerns that U.S. citizens that live near the border could be prosecuted under the same provisions. If they cross into the military base, which is outlined, yeah, they could be. Chances are good they wouldn't unless they had illegals with them. Unless they were shepherding or coyoting illegals across the border. The charges against at least a half dozen immigrants, illegal immigrants, for unauthorized entry onto military defense property were signed by U.S. Attorney Ryan Ellison, Alamogordo, New Mexico native, sworn into office on April 18th. What does that have to do with anything? Troops are prohibited from conducting civilian law enforcement on U.S. soil under Posse Comitatus. An exception known as the military purpose doctrine allows it in some cases. Yeah, exactly. And those some cases are when there's a military base, military property. And once again, I agree 99.9% with this policy, except along the border and shorelines, our coastlines. I want to see a strong military presence along the border and the coastlines to protect us from illegal crossings. Mexico is saying, well, there's 1,000,000 Americans living in Mexico illegally. Should we treat them the same way? Hell yeah, deport them. You got your laws, you enforce them. If they're living in your country illegally, do what your laws say to do with them. That's on their heads. If they broke your laws, the only time I've ever had a real beef with Mexican laws was, as an example, I want to say Marine was caught in Mexico with one bullet in his car. No guns, nothing else, one bullet. Is 22 or 9 mil, 32, a small caliber bullet. It wasn't a 50 cal or anything. And it literally took congressmen going down there to get him out of jail, out of Mexican prison. That's the only time I've sat there and looked at Mexico's and said, what the hell are you doing? But Again, I mean, I've crossed the Mexican border when I was stationed in Arizona at Luke Air Force Base. I crossed the Mexican border quite a few times. Now, I always walked across or took a taxi across. I mean, I never, well, did I take my personal vehicle? I know, I think we walked across. I don't think we took our car across when my sister and such, when my sister and brothers came over to visit. But that was in the 70s. Oh, a lot's changed since then. That's been, my God, let's see. It's been 40 years. So who knows? Um, but like I said, I want to see strong military presence along the border. And I'm glad they're doing this. I am glad they're doing this. This is something I've been advocating for a long time. The newly militarized corridor includes Roosevelt Reservation, a 60-foot wide federal buffer zone that ribbons along the border, except where it encounters tribal or private owned land. Control of the Roosevelt Reservation was transferred mid-April from the Interior Department to the Defense Department in a presidential memo. The Interior Department also has designated areas beyond the Roosevelt Reservation for transfer to the military oversight. 60-foot wide. Wow. Okay. Since then, the Army has announced several military deployments to augment surveillance, expand roadways, and shore up barriers at the border. Personally, I want to see a 100-yard area, but 60 foot's a good start. That's a good start. I want to see 100 yards, though. I really do. And I would, the tribal lands, I would call that good dollar spent to either purchase that land from the tribes or pay the tribes to patrol it for us. That's, but that again, that's just me. I'd love to see that happen. But and there's some states out there trying to do some things dealing with illegal immigration. Here's the most recent one. A federal judge in Idaho has temporarily blocked a state immigration bill aimed at allowing local police to arrest immigrants, illegal immigrants, suspected of crossing into the state illegally if they are involved in another crime. Okay. Federal Judge Amanda Brailsworth, a Biden appointee, issued a preliminary injunction against parts of Idaho's House Bill 83, which criminalizes state entry and reentry, was passed by the legislature in March. It also aims at assisting federal deportation process. It mirrors a 2023 Texas law. And there is the judge, the district court judge. Governor Brad Little signed the bill into law on March 27th and became effective immediately. But Brailsworth blocked Idaho from enforcing it through a temporary restraining order she later extended in response to a lawsuit by the ACLU of Idaho. The ACLU argues the law attempts to supersede. No, it's not. But see, again, it's not superseding. You can't supersede federal law. It can augment federal law. You can go beyond federal law. You can't reduce. There's a federal law saying you can't do 55 along this stretch of highway. You can't do 55 more than 55 miles an hour. Well, the state can come in and say, now, well, we're going to make it where you can't make it illegal to do more than 50. And that's perfectly fine. But the state can't come in and say, well, we're going to make it where you can't do more than 60. Because federal law said that you can't do more than 55. So you can exceed federal law, make it more stringent. You can make it more stringent, but you can't go less than the federal law. I hope I'm making myself clear there. Attempts to supersede federal immigration enforcement by allowing local law enforcement to act as immigration agents. They're not acting as immigration agents. All right. What they are doing is if they have suspected of crossing into the state illegally, if they are involved in another crime, they have to be involved in another crime first. It's like getting pulled over. A cop just can't pull you over to check your driver's license, registration, and insurance unless they're at a checkpoint, which I totally disagree with. But you're driving down the road, and the cop can't say, I don't like the looks of that person. I'm going to pull them over and look and ask for their driver's license. Or I'm going to look to see if they've got if I can smell any weed coming out of that car. And you haven't done anything illegal. But that doesn't mean that they can't follow you. And then once you've done something illegal, like swerve one time too many, change lanes without using your turn signal, make a turn without using your turn signal at least 100 feet or 200 feet, depending on the state or city you live in, before making that turn. Wife, she teases me because I'm always on her about not using her turn signal. She waits until she's getting ready to make the turn, then using it. And I keep telling her she's going to get a ticket for that one day. Because here in Florida, the cops will go through phases where they are going to ticket you for not using your turn signal at least 100 feet prior to making the turn. So I always use my turn signal, 200 to 300 feet before I make my turn, unless there's another road in the way. Then as soon as I get to where it's reasonable that people understand I'm not making the turn down that first road, then I use my turn signal. Then they can pull you over. So if you're involved in shoplifting in Idaho under this law, and then they determine that you're an illegal, that's, you were arrested for shoplifting. You were arrested for speeding. You had your interaction with the police because you were speeding. You had your interaction with the police because you were shoplifting. You were drunk in public. You were out protesting, illegally protesting. You were, you were doing something that was an infraction of federal, state, or local laws and or ordinances, which gave the police a legal reason to interact with you. So then, oh boy, yeah, that cleared that throat right up, didn't it? Now, in her ruling, the judge said the ACLU had demonstrated a strong likelihood of success on several key claims, including the new offenses established by the law may violate the Constitution's due process clause. And again, the way I've read that law, they don't do anything until they've had a legal reason to interact with you. And I can't think of any, I mean, if you've entered this, if you are an illegal in the country, it should be incumbent upon, and the local police find out, the local constable finds out, local judge finds out you're in the state and you're in the country illegally, which would mean you were in the state illegally. They should be required to notify ICE and the Border Patrol. All right, you've got mandatory reporters for crimes against children. School teachers. Think about this. School teachers are mandatory reporters if they suspect that a child is being abused. Now consider how there are school teachers out there that consider parents who are against transsexual children, and using pronouns. Like me, I am against, my son, when his pronouns, he is not a Z or them. And if a teacher ever came to me and said, well, yeah, Z is, who the hell is Z? Well, that's your child. Oh, you mean my son? No, your child. Because in our classroom, your child is non-binary. He's not a male or it are not a male or female. And if I spoke out against that, some of those teachers, hey, that's a mandatory reporting because I'm abusing my child by that. So think about, we got school teachers who are mandatory reporters. It's a law that started out with good intentions. But then some of these teachers have taken it too far because they believe. Well, this law is no different than making local police, local judges, mandatory reporters to ICE and Border Patrol if they suspect that they've got somebody who's in the country illegally. That's not a violation of due process. She also wrote that the law is likely preempted by federal immigration and that organizations and 5 unnamed individuals representing the lawsuit could face irreparable harm if enforced. In other words, she knows of at least 5 unnamed individuals who are in the country illegally, and they could be forced to be deported. She is shielding illegals, the same thing that Duggan and Kano were arrested for, shielding illegals. Well, that's what this judge is doing. She is shielding illegals. That's what the ACLU is doing, shielding illegals. Under the law, entering the state unlawfully is classified as a misdemeanor. However, if the person is involved in another crime, such as theft, or is under investigation, the offense would be elevated to a felony and may trigger deportation by federal authorities. A crime is a crime is a crime. And if you're in the state illegally, if you're in the state illegally, if you're in the country illegally, remember California has got its own border patrol to inspect vehicles entering the state, vehicles owned by U.S. citizens. And that's been upheld by the courts that they're allowed to do that. And you can go to jail for illegally entering the state of California as a U.S. citizen. I've shown that before. And no, okay, and here the ACLU is lying. We are pleased the court recognized the enforcement of this law is harmful and unconstitutional. No, the court did not rule that. She just said you got standing to take it to court. And harmful, that's a personal opinion. Unconstitutional at this point is a personal opinion. It is not a ruling by the court. It is saying, yeah, you got the right to be heard in a court. And the law is not anti-immigrant. Control of the language. They're lying. It's not anti-immigrant. It's anti-illegal immigrant. Illegal. That is such an important word that keeps getting left off by the left. They don't like that word illegal, even though it accurately describes these people. They are in the country illegally. And when you're in the country illegally, you should be deported. Oh, me and my soapbox. All right. The courts have got a problem. It's at all levels. Supreme Court. I mean, the United States Supreme Court had this problem a couple years ago with leakers. People sworn to secrecy within the court system, the state Supreme Courts or the federal Supreme Courts. People are sworn to secrecy in that they will not release any new information about what the court is doing until the court actually releases it. But they got people out there leaking. And the Wisconsin court a year ago after a year of investigations, investigators released a report yesterday that the leak of a Wisconsin Supreme Court abortion order last year was deliberate, but they're unable to determine who's responsible. This was a draft order. Then this was just a draft order saying that the state Supreme Court would take a case brought by Planned Parenthood. It wasn't a decision on the case. It was just saying, yeah, we're going to take this case. And somebody leaked it out to the news media. Who? Just like in the federal Supreme Court, we don't know. I can't remember who first thought of doing this, but I know it's even been done by the Trump administration, but it's been done by years to find out who's leaking information by subtly changing a word or two here or there in a message to the different people within the organization. Uh, or even, a point of issue within the message that whichever one of those variants got released out to the news media would indicate who the leaker was. And I am surprised at the lack of doing this as a standard policy when it comes to information within the federal government or the state government. When you're doing something that's going to be newsworthy, of you know restricting or making changes to subtle changes as to what is being sent out to different people, so you got an idea of who's doing what. But remember, when the Dobbs decision was released, when the Dobbs decision 2 years ago was or a few years ago was leaked out, that caused riots and protests across the country. And all the great resources within our country, investigators couldn't figure out who in the hell it was that did it. I don't believe that for a moment. I really and truly don't. I think it was somebody with an important enough name that they didn't want to release it out that they had done it, and because that would have caused political damage to someone or to a family. But that, again, that's just my opinion. Okay, I don't care about that. Just got news flash that the Trump is telling us what he told Zelensky. And it's like, I don't care what Trump told Zelensky. Not at this point. I'll look at that later. Now the rest of this is we're going to be spent talking about the FBI in one, for the most part, one way, shape, and or form. And I almost wish Dar could have made it, because I would love to have his opinion on his insights into some of this. But the FBI here, Kash Patel. Now, they're not saying Kash did it, but Kash is in charge of the FBI. So FBI reassigns agents photographed kneeling during the St. George protests. The FBI has reassigned several agents, not all, but several agents, who were photographed kneeling during a racial justice protest in Washington that followed the 2020 death of St. George Floyd. Two people familiar with the matter said on Wednesday. I hate these people familiar with the matter. I can understand why people don't want that, why they want, you've got a bone to pick with the government. You got the bone to pick with the supervisor. You got a bone to pick with, Patel. And you're one of these big bleeding heart liberals over there at the FBI, but you don't want to let Cash know that you're the one uh, doing what you can to denigrate him in public. So, keep my name out of this, but this is what's going on. But if they ever find out who did that, I hope like hell they fire them and they lose their pensions. I really and truly do. As I said before, when you work for the government, you work for the government. Your personal opinions are kept to yourself and you don't go work. And if you don't like whoever's heading up your agency to the point that you're going to do what you want to do, what you can do to destroy their career, their position, whatever, get the hell out. Quit your job. Then do what you want to do. But quit your job first. Don't keep accepting the coin of the realm while you're doing what you can to destroy or tear down that realm. Publicly trying to destroy. Now, if you're trying to make changes from within, hey, that's one thing. That's something else. Sometimes change is good. And people should be looking forward to making changes within an organization to make an organization better. But you want to do that from within the organization. You don't want to go out to the press and make this change and try to force the changes on through the press and through public pressure or whatever. The reasons for the moves were not immediately clear, though they come as FBI under Director Kash Patel has been undertaking broad personnel changes. And as Deputy Director Dan Bongino has repeatedly sought to reassure supporters of President Donald Trump who are critical of the Bureau that their complaints are being taken seriously. The FBI did Trump dirty for political reasons, not because Trump made any crimes, committed crimes, but it was all political lawfare. And Merrick Garland should roast in hell for what he did. Politically roast in hell. He proved why he was prevented from getting on the Supreme Court. His actions proved why he should never have been nominated to be on the Supreme Court. He is a petty, petty, petty man. The director and I are working on a number of significant initiatives to ensure the mistakes of the past are never repeated and that many of your open questions are answered, Bongino wrote in a recent post on X. Did not specify what mistakes or questions he was referring to. The reassignments first reported by CNN are confirmed by the AP by two people familiar with the matter who insisted on anonymity to discuss non-public personnel moves. The photographs that issued showed a number of agents taking a knee during one of the demonstrations following the May 2020 killing of Floyd. The kneeling angered some in the FBI, but was also understood as a possible de-escalation tactic during a period of widespread protests, and the agents were not punished at the time. If you were on duty as FBI and you're out publicly protesting like that, you should be fired. Active duty military. I've told this story before. I was royally reamed for being videoed at the airport singing Christmas songs and hymns with the Salvation Army. I was at the airport. I was in uniform. I was at the airport flying home to visit my parents for Christmas. And the Salvation Army was sat up there, and I stood over to the side, and I was sort of singing along with them. I had to wait for my airplane. And I'm standing there. I'm not in the group. I was just sort of over to the side, and I'm singing along with them. But I was in uniform, and the local news was doing their thing, and you could see me standing over there, and you could see my mouth moving. It was obvious I was singing along with them, and I was royally reamed for it when I got back. The only thing that stayed in my butt is I was still a slick sleeve. I had no stripes. I hadn't even been in the service 6 months yet. That is the only thing that saved me from being demoted because I had nowhere to demote me to. The only thing they could really do as far as my stripes went was delay me putting on my first stripe a couple more months. Instead of putting it on at 6 months, they could have made it 8 or 12 months. That's about the only thing they could have done to me. That way. Yeah, Salvation Air Force data. Yeah, I tell you what though, when I got back off of leave, man, I was in front of the commander and first sergeant, and I got my butt chewed royally. I made certain never to do anything in uniform again out in public that could be taken anyway, but anyway, the only time I ever went off base in uniform after that is if I was on military business. And then I didn't even go through a drive-through at Mickey D's in uniform. I didn't even, I would not stop to get gas. If I needed to get gas, and I couldn't wait to get home to change clothes, I'd go to the base gas station and get gas. I would not, for the rest of my career, unless I was on official military business, you never saw me off base in uniform. Going from home to work, from work to home. That was it. I was not getting put in that position again. And the FBI agents, it's kind of late. You can't punish them now for what they did 5 years ago under another regime. That's not fair. But if these agents did that stuff on their own, and it wasn't part of their job to do that, they weren't ordered to do that, then move them someplace where they're not in such a public point. Yeah, I can see that. I don't want to talk about that, right? How'd that get in my FBI file? Okay. Now here's where I'm going against all law enforcement here, guys. All right. It's just the FBI is the one before the Supreme Court or that went up before the Supreme Court on this. And I hope the FBI loses this case. I really and truly do. Now, we all know what qualified immunity is. All right. And let me post up this definition for you real quick. Qualified immunity is a legal principle in the United States that grants government officials performing discretionary functions immunity from lawsuits for damages. It protects state and local government officials from being sued for their actions in civil court. Qualified immunity shields government officials from liability unless they violate clearly established statutory or constitutional law. Now, the problem with this in a lot of cases is what may be clearly constitution or statutory law in Arizona won't be in Florida. Because either the Supreme Court has not ruled on it yet, or your district courts haven't made a ruling on it yet, or your appeals courts haven't made a ruling on it yet. Your portion of the judiciary has not made a ruling on it yet. For example, public photography. The Supreme Court has not ruled on public photography. That's why in Florida, a law I strongly disagree with, you have to be at least 25 feet away from police officers when recording them. If you're any closer than 25 feet, you can be arrested. And it's not like the cop is going to break out a tape measure and measure out how far you were standing. They're just going to say, yeah, you're closer than 25 feet and arrest you. And they're going to say you were closer than 25 feet. Then you have to prove you were further than 25 feet. Because obviously the cop is, right. Whereas in other states, it's 5 foot or 10 foot. Or there is no distance. You can be as close as you can safely be and record the cops performing their actions. No, going into a government building that's open to the public. Courthouses are a different situation. But anyway, what is defined as statutory law or constitutional law? All right, I'm getting a little bit off. In one state may not be in another state. So you have to know what rulings have gone through either the SCotUS or through your appeals courts within your district to know whether or not the cops will have statutory, to know whether or not just the police, but all government officials have got statutory immunity or qualified immunity. Checking the street sign, is that asking too much? Gorsuch and Sotomayor are reluctant to give immunity to FBI agents who raided the wrong house. Right now, the way it's set up, this is why it's going to the Supreme Court. The FBI raided the wrong house. They clearly went to the wrong home. The justices fast-tracked oral arguments Tuesday in the case of a Georgia family who was mistakenly raided by an FBI SWAT team. 6 FBI agents in full tactical gear set out to raid a home and execute a no-knock warrant at 3:30 a.m. on October 18, 2017, as part of an FBI's Operation Red Tape initiative to combat gang violence in Georgia that began in 2015. The officer in charge knocked and announced their presence while another agent set off flashbangs at the entrance as the team entered the home. Although the team had scoped out the target location before the raid, no one noticed when the officer's GPS directed them to a nearby similar-looking home. The result was that Cortina Martin, Hilliard toy client, and Martin's son Gabe, who was then 7 years old, were subjected to a harrowing experience. Martin and Cleat hid in the bedroom closet, thinking their home was being burglarized, before an officer dragged Cleat into the bedroom floor with guns pointing at him. Meanwhile, Martin fell in the closet while another SWAT member pointed a gun in her face and yelled for her to keep her hands up. The child, Gabe, was separated from both adults while the team executed the warrant. A 7-year-old had a gun pointed at him. A wife and mother had a gun pointed at her, and the husband had a gun pointed at him, most likely at the back of his head. Once the lead officer realized the team had raided the wrong house, he apologized and told that family the FBI would handle any damage to their home. However, when no repairs or compensation were forthcoming, Martin and Cleat filed a lawsuit represented by an advocacy group, the Institute for Justice, for false arrest, negligence, false imprisonment, assault, and battery. Although the federal government is usually immune from lawsuits, the Federal Tort Claims Act waives that immunity in certain circumstances, including when the plaintiff has a state law claim stemming from government officials' performance of discretionary duty that advances federal policy. The lawsuit claims against FBI Special Agent Lawrence Guerrera, who led the ring, were dismissed on the district court in Georgia on qualified immunity grounds. The Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, and this is what I was talking about, you got to know what circuit that you're in to know whether or not it's established statutory or constitutional law. Because what is in one circuit isn't in another. The 11th Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit agreed, taking the unusual position that the lawsuit was barred by the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The result is the justices now face a complex legal question that involves the interplay between state and federal law, where the mistaken warrant execution was discretionary on the part of the officers. Now, I'm going to stop here for a moment. If the raid had been taking place at the proper house, at the house identified on the warrant, you would think at the minimum requirement for every officer on this raid would be to know the correct address that they were going to, especially the lead officer. But the lead officer and his lieutenants, those directly underneath him, with supervisory positions over other agents there shouldn't be responsible for knowing this correct address that they're going to. And to confirm that correct address prior to executing the raid. I mean, how difficult is it? You've got this warrant. You're setting up this no-knock raid. It's not like you get the warrant and then you go out and execute that warrant 20 minutes later. There's preparatory time taken to execute these no-knock warrants, especially at 3:30 in the morning. And part of that preparation should be doing surveillance of the house. The actual physical house or location to know exactly where you're going, which could be as little as driving by, confirming the street address, and knowing exactly where you're going, to know exactly where you're going. That should be a minimum requirement, an absolute minimum. That sometime during daylight hours, you went out, confirmed the address, confirmed the location of that house, physically confirmed it, drew it out on a paper map even. To say that you relied upon a GPS, Waze or Google Maps or Bing Maps or whatever, to give you directions to where you're going and just assume that where you're going is the right house. That's garbage. That is absolute garbage. You did not take responsibility. You did not take the minimal steps needed to ensure that you are going to be going to the correct location. This is my opinion. I got a doctor's appointment. I got a doctor's appointment someplace I've never been before. I'm going to go see a set of specialists I've never seen before, and I know I've got a 9:00 doctor's appointment, and this doctor's appointment is 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now. I'm going to drive by, make certain I know exactly where it's at, what kind of business I'm looking at, what kind of parking is available. How long is it going to take me to get there? Because I'm that person. If my doctors will tell you, I got a 9:30 appointment. I'm showing up at 9:15 at the absolute latest. Usually I'm showing up at 9:00. I'd rather get there and sit in the waiting room for a half hour for my appointment than get there and find out that I missed my appointment because of traffic. But if I was leading a raid on somebody's home, especially at 3:30 in the morning, I'd want to make damn certain I knew exactly where that house was and how I was going to get there. And these FBI agents did none of that. They relied on a GPS to take them there. Okay, back to the article. Two justices who typically occupy opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, however, brought the discussion back to reality at hand. A family that was traumatized by serious police error. Sotomayor pressed the assistant to the Solicitor General Frederick Lew about Congress's intent when it amended the FTCA in response to the 1973 Collinsville, Illinois raids, in which federal raid teams set up by Nixon to combat public enemy number one targeted the wrong home without a warrant. 1973. Okay. That's what, 52 years ago? This was an issue. Sotomayor argued the wrong house raid on Martin House was precisely the kind of event Congress contemplates when amending the federal law to allow for liability. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. There should be no question about that in anybody's mind. Likewise, Neil Gorsuch seems similarly unwilling to accept Lew's argument that the officer's actions in the current case were discretionary under the law. They were acting under a warrant that wasn't discretionary. You might look at the address of the house before you knock down the door, Gorsuch commented sardonically. Lew argued the warrant executions required trade-offs, such as officers are choosing not to double-check a house number in an effort to maintain their cover. But, Mommy, I was busy. I wanted to surprise you. I was too busy to do my homework. Gorsuch was not having it. How about making sure you're on the right street? Just the right street. Checking the street sign. Is that asking too much? Hell, no, it's not asking too much. It's not asking too much that they confirm the street address. How about the name on the mailbox? I've got my name on my mailbox. I've got my last name on my mailbox. The wife and I had a discussion about that. She wanted to know if we should, why I was doing it. Because I want to make certain that packages are being delivered to my house. So having my name on the mailbox above the street address helps ensure that anything coming to my house is getting to my house. And something that's not supposed to be coming to my house doesn't come here. Jackson raised another concern. The Supreme Court requested briefing and arguments on the legal question different from initially raised by the litigants. As a result, Jackson said that there may be questions about the legality of the Supreme Court's jurisdiction authority to decide the case about it before it. The Supreme Court? Who would have jurisdiction, Jackson? Who would remember? This is the person who couldn't define a woman. And she wants to know whether or not the Supreme Court's got jurisdiction? The highest court in the country? And you don't know whether or not you have the jurisdictional authority to decide the case? You've got jurisdictional authority to decide any case in the country. You're the Supreme Court you are the United States Supreme Court. There is no court above you. There is no other court that could possibly have jurisdiction. You've got jurisdiction over the entire frickin' country, woman. You never should have been put on the court. You are too damn, if you don't know that, you are too damn stupid to be on the courts. Now, the oral arguments were over 3 hours. Then that's why I'm not playing them, because it's over 3 hours long. And I just don't have the time today to do it. I can't do a 4 or 5 hour stream. It will actually be a 5 or 6 hour stream today. So I aim, I listened to about an hour and a half of them. There's some good questions. And I sat there, yelling at the stupidity of the Solicitor General. I mean, I understand he's got to stand there and make these arguments. He's got no choice. That's his job, to defend the FBI. But there was no defense. There absolutely was none for the FBI raiding the wrong house. Not when they're even on the wrong damn street. I may be able to understand it, be a little more forgiving of it if the address was 4397 and they accidentally raided 4399 in a subdivision where all the houses are built identically. I may be a little bit more understanding of a mix up there. But when you're not even on the right road, there's no way I can forgive that. There's no way I can be understanding. There's no excuse for that. So, just guys, I mean, this is where I wish Dar was here, because maybe Dar would look at this a little bit different than I. And I honestly, I seem to be a bit disappointed in a couple of the justices besides Jackson. I'm going to wait for and we'll be revisiting this when the ruling finally comes down. And I got a feeling that I will be a bit more vocal on a couple of the justices and what they've got to say about it. But you see, we'll come over here to this other story. This is another story here dealing with qualified immunity. But there are several states that have limits on qualified immunity. Right now, 4 states have completely banned qualified immunity from police officers, period. There is no such thing as qualified immunity. And a lot of things that give cops qualified immunity is they didn't know the law. You and I, as individual, for how many years has the ignorance of the law is no excuse? Unless you're a cop, unless you're law enforcement. If you're law enforcement, ignorance of the law is an excuse. I didn't know that what they were doing was legal. That is a legitimate excuse for the police when they arrest you in many cases. And the problem is people got so fed up. The people got so fed up with cops getting away with arresting people and people spending weekends in jail and months and months and months and thousands of dollars to go to court and win in court, or have the prosecutor at the last minute drop all charges. And when they go to sue the police to get back the money that they spent, only to say, have the cops, uh, you know, have the cases dismissed under the cops having qualified immunity because, well, they didn't know that what you were doing was legal at the time. That states, people have demanded that qualified immunity no longer exists for state and local laws. Now, they can't do that for federal law, but they can do it for state and local laws. Colorado recently did it. Montana, Nevada, and New Mexico have completely banned police officers from using qualified immunity as a defense in a state court. That's a good thing. Six states plus New York City have either limited or banned illegal immunity for police officers facing civil rights lawsuits. That includes, but is not limited to, qualified immunity. You see that's California, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. I believe that's Rhode Island. That could be Delaware or Delaware. But anyway, I know that's bad right now. I'm not remembering the name of that state. But anyway, these are good. These are good. If you and I are going to be held responsible for knowing the law or being subject to criminal penalties, because we didn't know what we was doing was illegal, and the cop and the prosecutor and the judge sits there and they basically say ignorance of the law is no excuse. That same theory should be directed, should be, applied to law enforcement. In my personal opinion, it should not only be applied, but cops should be LEOs, all law enforcement, anybody working in law enforcement should be held to a higher standard than you and I are, because that's their job. Their job is to know what is and is not the law, because they are the ones with the badges, the uniforms, and the guns. The tasers and the billy clubs. Yeah, I know they don't call them billy clubs anymore, but you know what I'm talking about. But I want them held liable. I want them held responsible for their actions. There's no excuse. Now, I've never been arrested as a civilian. I've been arrested once by the Sky Cops when I was a airman. I was arrested once, but I've never been. I mean,
330
okay,
8169.
I got mute. Hello.
Good morning,
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm terrific. Thanks.
Okay, guys, I'm back. I'm sorry for the 7 minute interlude there, but that was a very important phone call. I absolutely had to take it. Um, okay, so let's see. Back here, this qualified immunity. That Ohio's trying to pass qualified immunity. Um, and is actually the Ohio Supreme Court has ruled that this can go up on the next election. All right, as a ballot point. The proposed amendment, this is to the Ohio State Constitution, would eliminate qualified immunity for government officials, allowing citizens to sue for constitutional rights violations. Mayors and school board superintendents, besides the police, are really bad at violating people's civil rights, especially First Amendment rights. You get up into a town hall meeting, and these town halls will have will have these really stringent rules, such as you can't call anybody out by name. You can't directly accuse a member of the mayor's office or uh, the city council of anything. You can't, school boards will say the same thing, and whereas they will cut your mic or threaten you with the removal or arrest, even if you don't abide by their rules. Well, the problem is there are court decisions. Again, look at which uh, circuit you're in, that have stated that these rules are unconstitutional. That during town hall meetings, during school board meetings, when public comment is there, the only thing they're allowed to do is limit your time, but they cannot limit the content of your speech. There's one particular preacher who has gone around to different school board meetings and such, reading out of these school books. I'm using that term very loosely. Books available to young children through the school libraries or through their classrooms, that the school superintendent will, you can't use that kind of language here. Well, if this language is barred here at this meeting, why is it being allowed to be read by students in your classrooms? And he's been arrested a couple of times because he refuses to shut up until his time is up. The Ohio Attorney General David Yost repeatedly rejected their proposal's language, leading to the lawsuit. The federal judge sided with the voters, and the Ohio ballot subsequently approved a revised version of the amendment. So it's, you'll hear a lot of people mostly target police with qualified immunity. But it's not, like I said just now, it's not just the police. It's mayors, it's elections officials, it's school board superintendents. It's anybody who stands up there with that little gavel in their hand trying to tell you what you can and cannot say in public at a public meeting, telling you that you can't be critical of the school board, you can't be critical of a teacher, you can't be critical of the mayor. That is an infringement on your First Amendment rights. And that is why these, qualified immunity laws need to be removed. These qualified immunity protections need to be removed. Because these people have abused their positions and to restrict your speech and other constitutional rights. And then hid behind, well, I'm a government employee, I've got qualified immunity. And this will be, I'll be looking forward to seeing when this goes up on the ballot to see how it turns out. And I just got put under a water boil notice. I hate that. Okay, and finally, well, not finally, let's see here. What do I want? I want to talk about California here. Yeah. This is going to be the last one I'm going to talk about here, I think. Welfare fraud is rampant in California. Now a Democrat wants to legalize it. The same state that legalized shoplifting up to $950, which made it so bad that entire uh, companies closed down storefronts in areas. That parts of the state, certain parts of cities have no stores in them anymore. There's no Walgreens, there's no CVS, there's no Walmart, no Target. Because the stores were going broke from the shoplifting because anything under $950 was legal. The police wouldn't even respond to them. Now wants to legalize welfare fraud. Democrat lawmaker in California is pushing legislation that would decriminalize most welfare fraud. State Senator Lola Smallwood Saveas recently introduced SB 560, a bill that would eliminate criminal penalties for welfare fraud involving cases less than $25,000. So you could steal $24,999 through welfare fraud, and it'd be legal. It wouldn't be legal, but it'd be decriminalized. And remember, no matter where you live, Your tax dollars is going to support welfare. It's not just California taxpayers paying this welfare that's being money that's being fraudulently used. That money, it's our taxes, goes to the federal government, then the federal government distributes it back to the states. Now, her claim is right now a missed deadline or a paperwork mistake can lead to felony charges that tear families apart. SB 560 provides a smarter, more humane approach by allowing counties to resolve most overpayment cases administratively, holding people accountable without criminalizing. Welfare fraud in California is regularly reported but rarely prosecuted. In Los Angeles County alone, investigators identified fraud in more than 5,000 cases, but only referred about 200 of them to the DAs for prosecution. Less than 10% got sent for prosecution. So, I mean, as it is, 90% of welfare fraud isn't prosecuted. And again, I'm not talking about somebody making an innocent mistake. But actual fraud. And we see it happening. I mean, one of the biggest, most common cases that I know of from my own observations, that I know of, a woman with 2 or 3 kids living in Section 8 housing turns down full-time work because that would raise her individual income up. She only wants to work part-time. Oh, and by the way, baby daddy lives with them in their Section 8 housing. They're not married. And officially, he lives somewhere else. His mailing address is somewhere else. He's got a P.O. box. But he lives with his baby's mama in Section 8 housing. Government's picking up the majority of the rent, the majority of the electric bill. Putting her kids into daycare for nominal fees. The state's picking up the cost of that. And oh yeah, Neil. There was that case here not too long ago. People go in with EBT cards, buy a bunch of soda, take them out and dump them in the parking lot, take the empty cans back in to get money to buy cigarettes. Or a 6-pack of beer. The Department of Justice said $181 million have been stolen from EBT beneficiaries in California between 2022 and 2024. Last year, the DOJ arrested 7 foreign nationals in San Diego for theft of using counterfeit EBT cards. The sheer amount of benefits California provides to welfare recipients makes the target, according to Sean Ferris, Vice President of the California Welfare Fraud Investigators Association. Part of the reason why California is so ripe for the picking is we give so much out. California's food stamp program will pay out nearly 13 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars in benefits this year. Although food stamps are federally funded through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, they are administered by the state, meaning taxpayers nationwide are on the hook for any fraud or mismanagement. In 2023, more than 11% of California's food stamp funds were improperly spent on overpayments, totaling roughly 1.3 billion with a B billion dollars in wasted taxpayer money. When asked by the Daily Caller News Foundation to provide an example of felony charges being brought under California law for a missed deadline or paperwork mistake in a welfare program, Senator Smallwood Cervantes' spokesman said she was unavailable for a comment. So the senator's making a claim there that people who make a paperwork error are being prosecuted for felonies, but couldn't even provide one, couldn't or wouldn't or couldn't, your choice. Provide a single example of it happening. I've been, as a child, our family spent about 6-7 months on food stamps. And I remember working my butt off for our landlord at the time. He rubbed it in our faces that, us kids had to work for him to make certain that my mom had enough money to pay the rent. And he treated us like dog dirt. My younger brother, I didn't like the way he treated us, but I kept my mouth shut and I did it because I knew we needed the money. I mean, you know, got paid really crappy for digging potatoes, picking cucumbers, splitting logs because he sold firewood. So we split logs and stack them up into cords, and then go with him to unload the truck and stack them up at people's houses. And he didn't pay us much, but we always, for those few months that we needed it, we managed to keep the rent paid and keep a roof over our head and food on the table. I was only in 6th or 7th grade at the time. So I remember what it was like. I remember working our butts off to make certain we had food on the table. And that's why I get so disgusted when I see people abusing the system. It just makes me madder than hell to see people abusing the system like this. Welfare is, I've got no problem with welfare to be there to help people out when they need the help. But it shouldn't be a lifetime experience. It shouldn't be something that you're on forever. And honestly, if we've got jobs for illegals, we've got jobs for people on welfare. It really and truly is that simple. Okay, I want to close that tab because we talked about that. I'll close that tab, talk about because we did that. Talked about that already. Oh, well, there's a new congressman, one that hasn't done it before. We're not talking about Al Green here. A I can't even pronounce this guy's name properly right now because I've only just heard of him a couple of days ago. Democratic Representative Shri Thandar, Thanedar of Michigan, has filed impeachment charges against Trump. Why? What has Trump done? High crime or misdemeanor has Trump done that he needs to be impeached or removed from office, according to this Democrat? He hasn't done enough to bring in an illegal who is a member of MS-13 back to the United States from his home country in El Salvador. Mr. Abrego Garcia. He feels Trump hasn't done enough and therefore has committed a high crime and or misdemeanor and should be impeached and removed from office. Now, this is the same representative, Sri Thanedar of Michigan, who voted against the Lake and Riley Act. One of a half a dozen Democrats who refused to vote for the Lake and Riley Act. So he's got a real soft spot in his heart, like a lot of Democrats seem to do, for illegals. And that's going to be something fun to see what's going on there. And that's as much as I'm going to go ahead and do today. I want to thank you guys for coming out, and I do appreciate y'all putting up with that 6.5 minute interlude there while I was on a very important phone call. But thank you much. Tomorrow will be a fun stream. I don't know what we're going to do. Raman and I will try to get together this evening to see what we want to do for tomorrow. But everybody, have a good day. Enjoy yourselves. Be with the ones you love. And seriously, people, love your family. Let your family know that you love them. All right? Love the ones that you're with. Have a good day now.